Welcome back. You're still with us on Global Eye. As we get closer to the union budget, we're discussing the world's expectations from India as an investment destination. Remember, this will also be a challenging year. The global slowdown will have an impact on India's exports. Tackling inflation is going to be a challenge as well. And what will be the growth considering all these headwinds? Joining us now to talk about this all is Arvind Panagariya, former Vice Chairman of the NITI Aayog. Mr. Panagariya, thank you very much for joining us. Give us a sense of what global investors, multinationals, would be looking at as far as budget 2023 is concerned. Or do you feel that this budget will be very high on populism?
Well, as far as the global investors are concerned, those who know India also know that, this is the last full budget that the government will be presenting before the 2024 elections. So they do understand that some bit of populism will be there. But they also know that, the present government follows a different kind of populism. It generally goes for schemes in which delivery to the beneficiaries is highly productive. So I think from that perspective, I would say the expectations can't be currently high, at least for the investors who know India well. This being said, some bit of fiscal consolidation they will be looking for because, the debt to GDP ratio has gone up to 84%. And other good features also they will be looking for, things like, larger capital expenditure, building up infrastructure, and some announcements on continuing ease of doing business reforms. There are other areas of reforms which may not directly impact the investors, but nevertheless, to the extent that provides a signal as to what direction the government is taking, any announcements of reforms will probably be of interest to them as well.
Right. Now, we have been hearing over the last few months how the government is changing its stance on Chinese investments. They want to have Chinese JVs with Indian companies in areas which are strategically important for us, where we do not have strength in intermediary product manufacturing. We are wooing suppliers of Apple to come and make iPads in India as well. So how do you think India should approach the China Plus One strategy? We see a lot of investments going to Vietnam. How important is this budget from the point of view of seizing Chinese Plus One investments?
I think that's an ongoing agenda. And this is really a great opportunity for India to capitalize on the changed environment in which virtually all multinationals are seeking at least one more destination, what you just mentioned as China Plus One. So from that perspective, we have to continue to generally open up the economy. And particularly, I think, the progress on the free trade agreements from that perspective is extremely important. Because at the end of the day, multinationals come not just for the domestic market. I think domestic market is important for them, but ultimately they are large exporters. They are very much plugged into the global economy, and India's own interest also is in having multinationals precisely from that perspective that India becomes the manufacturing hub and becomes the key exporter of many of these manufacturing products. So I think the free trade agreements and in general trade liberalization, because you see the whole point is that not everything is produced in the same country of location. A lot of the components and increasingly so in the last 15 to 20 years, components are imported from elsewhere. And if the duties are high, then of course the costs add up. So we also need liberalizing our trade to become this kind of, hub of the supply chains, alternative supply chains that will be forming in the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. I would also like to ask you about manufacturing. While India has brought in several PLI schemes for at least 14 sectors to encourage manufacturing encourage localization, encourage exports. We've seen the manufacturing share in the GDP drop. To what extent do you feel the Make in India program has been a success? What more needs to be done to make India a leader in manufacturing and be a bigger contributor in global supply chains?
Yeah, no, I think that is really the crux of the matter. And what we have tried to do is, use, broadly speaking, an import substitution strategy, both through increased protection and through PLI. I think, even the PLI seems to be more concentrated in sectors where, in effect, we are importers of the products. Products in which we are larger exporters are not generally the targets of this PLI scheme. So the difficulty there, of course, is that, through import substitution, you cannot grow manufacturing on a very large scale. Ultimately, you have to look to the global marketplace. And that is why you have to be into the export industry. And that actually calls for completely the reverse strategy because, remember that both import substitution as well as PLI, to the extent that PLI is aimed at more of the import competing sectors, they put the remaining sectors at disadvantage. Because, when so many sectors get protected, then if you are unprotected, then you are basically being disprotected. Likewise, if incentives are given in certain sectors and, significantly large number of sectors, then if you are not getting the incentive, then you are disincentivized. So there is a negative impact on the rest of the sectors, and these are the export sectors. And ultimately, remember that any country which has successfully kind of built up manufacturing, which has successfully grown at 8 to 10%, they have done it on the back of being a part of the global economy, being major exporters, and having hosts to very large companies. If you got a set of large companies plugged into the export markets, then the medium-sized domestic companies also do well. Even the smaller ones do very well, actually. Once the ecosystem comes to be defined by the dominant export firms, then domestic entire ecosystem actually gears up to that. That is the strategy ultimately in the longer run we need.
Right. Mr. Panagariya, also when it comes to asset monetization, divestment, do you feel that the budget should perhaps somehow give a roadmap? We need to see some speeding up of projects which we have planned for under asset monetization, divestment. The reason why I'm asking is because today we have reported how the government could somehow dedicate this budget to the middle class. There could be changes in the tax regime to put more income in the hands of the middle class. For example, a new tax slab in the 10 lakh category could be introduced, and the tax rate could be brought down from 20% to 10%. So several measures like this to give more spending power to the middle class could be there in the budget. So what do you think about other measures that foreign companies, foreign investors would be looking out for?
Yeah. So most certainly, you mentioned monetization of assets, but also there is the issues of privatization of public sector enterprises, privatization of public sector banks. So all that privatization agenda, in which I will include the monetization of assets, has to move forward. It is politically a little challenging for the governments to actually put out a timetable. But nevertheless, the agenda can be accelerated. And the government could at least, make an announcement that it's committed to carrying out the privatization process and monetization of assets process. That would be a good signal. So that's one thing it can do. On taxation, of course, personal income taxation has been waiting to see the reforms. There was an alternative slab for taxes in 2020-21 budget that had been introduced, and that was the alternative schedule that taxpayers could use, provided they did not resort to any of the exemptions. But those tax rates remain relatively high, so there have not been many takers. I think this is a good time. I've been arguing about this in other forums as well, that this is a good time now to actually carry forward that reform, bring those tax rates down, and encourage people to shift to exemption-free schedule, so that eventually, in 2 to 3 years, we can eliminate the current the exemption Raj, as I call it. That whole regime ought to ultimately go away. And I think that will, one for one thing, the principle wise, the good economic principle is one of what we call the horizontal equity, meaning that equal income should be taxed at equal rates. The taxation should not depend on how I spend my income or how I earn my income. If I have certain income and you have a certain income, we should be subject to the same taxation. But the current system is not like that. So horizontal equity is required, both from efficiency point of view as well as from equity point of view. And that can be achieved only when you get rid of the exemptions. That also brings in simplification. Taxpayers then don't have to run to the chartered accountants and all. Don't have to pay such high fees to them. So for all that reasons, and it, as you said, it will also put more purchasing power in the hands of the taxpayers.
Okay, we've run out of time, but Mr. Panagariya, thank you so much for joining us here on Global Eye, giving us a sense of what India can do to become a bigger player in global manufacturing, global value chains, and also attract a large chunk of China +1 investments. It was a pleasure having you here on Global Eye. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.